Enter a tropical garden in Hawaii, where colorful and fragrant flowers arouse the senses. Survey a pastoral garden in New Zealand, graced with picturesque ponds and rivers. And visit an historic palace in Spain, with colorful Moorish courtyards and intimate patio gardens. Join us today for a captivating world garden tour. The tropical island of Kauai has been dubbed Hawaii's Garden Island. It's a magnificent botanical paradise with lush vegetation and some of the world's rarest plants. Kauai is the fourth largest of the Hawaiian Islands and proudly features the wettest place on Earth, Mount Waialeale. This mountain, located in the center of the island, averages an incredible 400 inches of rain each year. And located in the fertile Lawai Valley of Kauai's southern coast is the privately funded National Tropical Botanical Garden. Here, spectacular arrays of flowers and plants offer visitors an introduction to Hawaiian and other tropical plant life.
The National Tropical Botanical Garden is very much a living museum. We're in the business of collecting plants from all over the world, and what makes this such a unique place is that you can grow practically anything here.
The garden is massive, stretching from the coast to 2 miles inland. Its 186 acres are home to more than 5,000 varieties of tropical plants and flowers.
About 2/3 of all of the diversity in flowering plants actually grows in tropical regions of the world. And we've all heard the dire forecasts of the loss of biological diversity. And so a botanical garden in this day and age, it becomes a kind of Noah's Ark almost for the protection and preservation of this biological diversity.
Many flowers that once flourished throughout the islands are now being saved from extinction, like the hibiscus bracken ridgei, which also happens to be Hawaii's state flower.
Of the Hawaiian plants, which has been our primary collection and research focus for the past 5 years, we have 400 species we've grown. Half of those are endangered, and we have several species that are extinct in the wild and only exist now in our garden.
Another rare plant is the alula. Once a thriving species, it must now be hand-pollinated to ensure its continued existence. In addition to endangered plants, there are also ancient varieties here, including some palm trees said to predate human life on the islands. And you'll also find thousands of flowers which are simply beautiful to look at, like this exotic blue jade. What would a tropical botanical garden be without orchids? There are several splendid varieties, including dendrobium and cattleya, throughout this Hawaiian garden.
It's interesting, people associate orchids with Hawaii. We only have 3 native orchids. They're very small, and we don't have any of them growing in the garden. They're so rare, but the orchids that we have are hybrids or cultivars that have been developed by breeders, and they just love this climate, so they're epiphytes. They can be put in trees or put on rocks, and so we have orchids from all over the world, mainly as display and ornamental.
In 1990, the National Tropical Botanical Gardens took over the management and care of the adjacent Allerton Garden. Much of this world-acclaimed estate is comprised of distinct garden areas open to the public. They are connected by dramatic water features fed from natural underground springs. Other celebrated tropical flowers found here are the native gingers and anthuriums. And the snake cactus, originally from the Caribbean, now has a home in the National Tropical Botanical Garden. A drive up the scenic parkway promises a tropical jungle of plants and palms.
Here at the garden, actually the beauty starts with the natural lay of the land. We're in a large valley, red rock cliffs, large trees that were here formerly. And now we're bringing all these collections into this area and plant them to accentuate the natural features.
Parts of the garden look as though you stepped back in time. In fact, the gnarled roots of the Moreton Bay fig tree create such an eerie prehistoric effect. They were used as a backdrop for many scenes in the movie Jurassic Park.
The advantage of having a tropical botanical garden is primarily in our living collections. We're able to put together in one site plants that are rare and endangered, they're ornamental, they have economic use, and so people who are just interested in plants can come and see them growing. People who are researchers or scientists can come and study them and have access to them readily instead of having to go into the wild.
It's a seductive place in so many different ways. And while you look around and you see all these plants and these wonderful specimens, you see this great landscape, we should never be seduced into thinking that, that our work is ever done, but that we're in fact in the business of growing attitudes about plants here and communicating that information to each generation. And that's why I think a botanical garden is, which is an antique idea, is even more relevant today than it ever has been.
When we return to World Garden Tour, we're off to another island in the Pacific, to the South Island of New Zealand, where a former sheep farm is now a pastoral garden filled with botanical surprises. Now on World Garden Tour, come with us to New Zealand, where gardening is said to be the national pastime, and you can see why in their beautiful landscapes and farms. On the pastoral South Island of New Zealand lies the modest city of Christchurch, aptly nicknamed the Garden City. Here, there's a beautiful example of an English-style garden and farm. Created by early English settlers, it's called Mona Vale.
What makes Mona Vale homestead and the garden very special in Christchurch is that it gives a very strong link between what we have here in this country and what the early settlers brought with them from England, this heritage.
Mona Vale was originally built as a sheep farm in 1899. Today, the property features a commanding 12 acres of landscape gardens and is best known for its magnificent trees and spectacular collections of flowers and plants. When visitors first enter Mona Vale, they encounter the original homestead. Bright beds of colorful plantings border the driveway, hinting at the garden beyond. Just past the home, across the grassy paths, you'll come upon the scenic Avon River. Here, large willows and stately copper beech trees accent the picturesque waterway.
This is a very, very lovely location. But we've still got this beautiful bridge that's been restored and to give the spirit and the feeling of the former days. And there's a small area of ground just across this bridge which gives you an insight into what was there before.
Charming garden areas with colorful plantings are tucked away in surprising locations throughout Mona Vale. This lovely Victorian structure serves as a greenhouse for the protection of cool weather plants. A beautiful lily pond, designed by one of New Zealand's most prominent landscape architects, John Baxter, lies to the south of the homestead. This tranquil pond is surrounded by Japanese maples and conifers, and along the shoreline, lush agapanthus balance their purple blooms on towering green stems. Here, visitors can experience the peaceful serenity of Mona Vale while watching graceful water birds glide across the pond.
it's got that outdoor room experience. And I think that that's one of the things that people enjoy in Manor Vale, is that as you walk through the garden, you can't see it all from one entry to the exit, but it's a series of outdoor rooms that you move through one space and you go through an opening and another unfolds. And I liken it to outdoor rooms or perhaps chapters of a book. And each has its own special feeling and romantic touch to it.
This romantic area is Mona Vale's Rose Garden. And it's remarkable not only for its roses, but also for its collection of dahlias, fuchsias, and irises.
The public of Christchurch coming here could see, yes, how to grow roses, some of the better varieties for the local soils and climate, and similarly with dahlias and fuchsias. Throughout the garden there's a beautiful scent, and there are a number of plants that would bring that about at this time of the year. It's a very refreshing feeling and scent that it permeates the garden.
From its delightful flower gardens to its charming paths framed with stately trees, New Zealand's Mona Vale nobly reflects its British heritage.
Mona Vale has got built into it a real presence of England from the Victorian era, I would suggest. Grand style of trees, of lawns, with the wonderful river running through it. People love to come here and they feel as though they're stepping back into a little bit of history, and yet it's in modern-day New Zealand. You can spend a day here and just look at the various plants and parts of the collection. At the same time, you can come through here in an hour and it really says something about the garden city of Christchurch, that its love of plants within the people, and even if a person is not a keen gardener, there's a real affinity that they have with the plants and the garden and the therapy that it brings about.
When we return, we'll visit a 15th century royal palace in Spain, where colorful tiles and planters grace the gardens and exotic Moorish patios offer visitors a little bit of paradise. Our World Garden Tour now takes us to southern Spain and the remarkable patio gardens of Casa de Pilatos in the city of Seville. The Casa de Pilatos is a palace dating back to the late 15th century. Recently, this royal house of the Dukes of Medinaceli was restored to its 19th century splendor. It features a fascinating combination of historic styles.
It is the model, I would say, the most perfect example of what we call mudéjar, which is the different Christian styles, Gothic, Renaissance, even Baroque, but filtered by a culture, a tradition of Moorish craftsmanship.
The royal palace and grounds present several historic reminders of when the Moors ruled medieval Spain, including the ancient gate leading to the gardens, and the stucco, stone, and tile found throughout the patio gardens. Decorative yet serene outdoor spaces keep visitors shaded by tall palms and cooled by the refreshing waters of the Renaissance fountains. The patio gardens at the Casa were derived from the concept of Moorish courtyards, intended to represent small oases and a little bit of paradise.
The paradise, in fact, it's a word that comes from Persian. It coincides very much with the more general idea of the oasis, the place which is a safe haven from the heat, from the discomforts, etc., of the nomadic life.
The Moors believed that when looking up from the courtyard, the area of sky represented the homeowner's own piece of heaven. Water is an important feature of the Moorish patio garden.
Water, the sound of the water, the sight of the water jumping, that's enormously important. Possibly the very high price paid by the owners of this house, and they bought it in 1483, is that the house had running water, or at least was then known as running water. It was connected to a Roman aqueduct that had been put into function, again, by the Moors. And that made it very expensive because it was a privilege.
In the 15th century, fresh water was a matter of beauty. The waters feeding the casa from the aqueduct kept the fountains and gardens flourishing. Here in the Jardín Chico, or Little Garden, a young Bacchus, one of several Roman statues in the garden, overlooks a reflecting pond. The Jardín Chico's boxwood parterres invite a stroll along the colorful yellow walkways.
One of the features of this garden is the multicolor atmosphere. In the 1920s in Seville, it became fashionable to paint everything white. Everything was white. But in fact, research and even chance findings have revealed that in the 16th, 17th, even in the early 18th century, houses were extremely colorful, both inside and out.
The yellow walkways and orangey ochre painted walls and columns tie the diverse areas of the garden together. Some of the parterres have delicate rose bushes, while others include colorful surprises like orange and lemon trees.
In the 19th century, that tradition of flower planting inside the parterres was abandoned in favor of trees, a variety of trees. Palm trees became enormously fashionable in the mid-19th century.
The flowers one finds here, like angel trumpets and roses, are delicate accents to the foliage and trees. Following these paths, visitors will discover another colorful feature in the palace garden.
This house has probably the best collection of Renaissance styles in the whole of Spain. They date from the 1530s, and they include some models that have never been done again, and they are therefore unique. It's always with this idea of providing a colorful background.
The brilliant colors of the tile and stucco walls are a spectacular contrast to the lush greenery of the garden. And with open loggias or hallways, a fortunate resident could step out from their bedroom to enjoy the view. The dramatic loggias of the Jardín Grande, or large garden, display beautiful Roman statues and native frescoes of painted brick. This garden originally served the casa as a kitchen garden filled with vegetables and herbs. Today it is filled with palm trees, citrus trees, and flowering plants. A walk through the Jardín Grande reveals its most distinctive design element, a central axis where colorful paths intersect at 90-degree angles. In the center, there's a graceful Renaissance fountain. When we come back, we'll return to the Casa de Pilatos to appreciate one of the casa's most charming garden features, the decorative planters, and we'll share a few design tips on using containers in your own garden. As our World Garden Tour continues at the gardens of the Casa de Pilatos in Seville, Spain, we turn our attention to one of the garden's most simple yet charming features, the decorative planters. In the Casa's gardens, some of the planters on pedestals add classical artistic elements, while others simply bring greenery and color to the patios and stairs. High above, in the upper loggia, pots filled with roses add color to the iron railings. The creative placement of decorative pots and planters is a wonderful design element in this royal Spanish garden, and one that can also work in your own garden or patio. One idea is grouping together several small clay pots. This can bring color and interest to barren spaces. Designing your garden space with containers creates versatility. Plants can be changed out easily, and planters are often portable, so you can move them around your garden. And as many Spaniards from Seville will tell you, containers can provide your own little piece of paradise.
You will find pots in practically every balcony, on the terraces of the houses, etc. It's still here, that attitude.
From Royal Palace Gardens in Spain, to the tropical splendor of Hawaii, to serene farmlands of New Zealand, we thank you for traveling with us and hope you'll join us next time on World Garden Tour.